Wow, I love that crash intro, just stops, terrifying. Hi everyone, welcome to TBIJ Live. We are hosting ourselves online. We are the Bureau of Investigative Journalism. I'm Chrissy Giles, a Deputy Editor at TBIJ. Thank you so much for joining us today for this debate about disposable vapes. So for anyone new here, welcome. And if you're wondering who TBIJ is and what this is all about, please let me enlighten you. So TBIJ is the UK's largest non-profit newsroom, and we publish investigations about corruption, environmental destruction, big tech, defective drugs, government scandals, and much, much more. Our work is supported by grants from philanthropic organisations and foundations and charities, and donations from people who believe in our work. So we're completely independent, and that's why you might want to consider supporting us yourselves. Right, so our focus through all of our work, no matter where we are in the world or what topic we're looking at, is to expose injustice and to spark change. And TBIJ Live, this is where we are, is a chance for us to dig into this work with you all in more detail, and a chance for you to see behind the curtain of investigative journalism and to talk to some experts about the subjects we've been investigating. So today we've got people watching on our YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn channels. So welcome to everyone. And if you've got a question for our guests or a comment, more of a comment than a question, then all you have to do is add a comment below the stream and we will try. Oh, I love this. Look at that. It's so professional. You just ask a question, it will pop up and we will put it to our panel. More of them in a minute. So I know we're only, let's see, 3 minutes 8 in, and that includes the introduction. But if you're already inspired to be a part of our work and help support independent journalism in the UK covering global issues, one way you can do that is to donate to us. So there's details here on the screen. But like we said, we rely on funding to be independent. And if you want to help us and get to know more about us, please consider making a donation and also sign up to our newsletter to find out about our latest investigations. Right, so why are we here today? We're here today because I don't think you have to walk very far outside of your house or your office to find somebody puffing on a brightly coloured disposable vape. Now, it used to be that you go out and come home smelling of cigarette smoke. Now you come home smelling of all sorts of strange concoctions. You might find somebody puffing on something called a blueberry sour raspberry flavour vape or an orange gummy bear, a pink lemonade, cotton candy, or perplexingly, a unicorn shake. I don't know what they've done to the unicorns to make that flavour, but apparently it is a flavour. And disposable lips have been on everybody's, disposable vapes have been on everybody's lips recently. But not everybody's a fan. Across the summer so far, various organisers of festivals, including Glastonbury, have asked people coming to leave disposable vapes at home because of their environmental impact. And the local government association in the UK, which represents all the councils in England and Wales, has called on the government to ban the use of single-use vapes by 2024 on both environmental and health grounds. This came after a call from leading children's doctors to do the same, saying that youth vaping is fast becoming an epidemic amongst children. Now, if you're a parent or guardian or grandparent of children or teenagers, you may well be concerned by what is a growing number of stories around children smoking or vaping in toilets at schools and schools installing sensors or even locking toilets during classrooms to try and limit vaping on school premises. Of course, we're not here to say that vapes are bad. There's lots of positive potential aspects of vapes. According to the NHS, nicotine vaping is substantially less harmful than cigarette smoking, and it's also one of the most effective tools for quitting smoking. However, they add that vaping is not recommended for non-smokers and young people because it's not completely harmless. Now, major tobacco companies agree on this. They say that we need alternative products to help people stop smoking. And we don't have individual representatives from the big tobacco companies here today to put their views across. So I'm just going to give you a little taste up top of what they say on this topic. I'm just going to read it. So basically, the world's biggest tobacco companies recognize that combustible cigarettes, the traditional cigarettes, carry serious health risks, and they're committed to creating a world free of cigarettes. To help existing adult smokers move away from traditional cigarettes, they offer what are variously described as reduced risk, smoke-free or next generation products. And these products include things like vapes and nicotine pouches. Now, many of these reduced risk products contain nicotine, but not tobacco. So that's what the companies say. So in one corner of the TBIJ offices, we've been investigating the companies that make cigarettes and vapes for a number of years. Now, big tobacco, as we call it, is an industry whose products kill more than 8 million people every year. That's according to the World Health Organization. And if you want to find out more about the work we've done in this area, you can explore our investigations at tbij.com. You can also listen to our award-winning podcast, Smokescreen. We've also provided a little explainer to kind of try and delineate the difference between e-cigarettes, vapes, they're the same thing, heated tobacco, cigarettes, pouches, all sorts of things. And you can also find that at our TBIJ site. Yes, loving this. Okay, enough of me, always enough of me. Today we've got 3 fantastic experts to help us unpick this topic and ask the question whether the UK should ban disposable vapes or not. But just before I introduce them, we headed out last week to meet some members of the general public, unsuspecting general public members, around our offices to ask them what they thought about whether the UK should ban disposable vapes. And we're going to watch a little bit of that now.
I think so. It probably helped me quit. Well, I've got I had juice that I put into a vape, but I ran out of my juice. That's why I bought one of these. So I think if you're gonna vape, maybe get it from a special vape shop where you have to be over the age of 18 and show your ID to get it, rather than these disposable ones. 'Cause they're not good for the environment either. If you had like a refillable vape that you just charge and put the juice in, I think that's so much better than these ones.
If you do ban disposable vapes, does that mean people go back to smoking, which isn't great too?
I think, in my opinion, disposable vapes should be banned. I think non-disposable vapes is a different story, but just the accessibility of them to kids in particular, and the environmental impact they have with their batteries, it's hugely unsustainable.
I do use them, but I think they're terrible. They're probably made for like 20p. They're definitely full of chemicals and really bad for you. I definitely wouldn't recommend smoking them at all.
Did you smoke before you went onto vapes?
Years ago, yeah. And then I gave up, and then I vape now and again now, yeah.
The problem is, no matter what you change about buying them, like, they tried stopping people by when they banned menthol stuff. But they're always going to find loopholes. You're always going to get one shop that will sell to anyone, or someone who'll buy them for like younger kids in the year to make a bit extra.
Yeah, where
silly
there's
stuff
a will,
like
there's
that.
a way. Where there's a will, there's a way, honestly.
I think they should be gone, to be honest. But like, you shouldn't really be smoking cigarettes anyway. Like, especially when you've got all the colours on them and all the flavours.
Yeah.
Just making them like for kids, aren't they? Really.
I'm back. I've taken off my headphones. So sorry if it was all out of sync and distracting. I am being beamed both from the past and the future at the same time. So sometimes that gets muddled up. So that's the view from the streets of London. If you want to find out what people really think about you, approach them with a microphone. And then I think you find the world splits into 2 camps of people. Anyway, now it's time to meet our guests. So first is Gillian Mackay. Gillian is a politician from the Scottish Green Party. She serves as a member of the Scottish Parliament for the Central Scotland region, and she's been campaigning to ban disposable vapes in Scotland. Gillian, so great to have you here. Thank you so much for giving up your time.
Thanks so much for having me.
Great. And next we have John Dunne. John is Director General of the UK Vaping Industry Association, which describes itself as the #1 trade association for the vaping sector. UK VIA, we love an acronym here. UK VIA members include British American Tobacco, Philip Morris International and Geek Bar. And last but most definitely not least is our TBIJ reporter, Matthew Chapman. Now, Matt spent 3 years investigating big tobaccos and vapes, and he was also a big part of our Smokescreen podcast project, which I mentioned earlier. So if you want to check out more of Matt's work, please go to tbij.com, as we said. And just because we love transparency and being upfront, and I mentioned before, all of our work is funded by philanthropic organisations or individual donors, and our global health work, distinctly in the tobacco part, was funded by a group called Vital Strategies, which is supported itself by a number of funders, including Bloomberg Philanthropies. So it's just important we say that up top so we know who's paying for the journalism. They have no involvement in our journalism. Right, I'm super excited. Thank you everyone for being here. Don't forget, everyone watching at home, if you want to ask a question, please type it in the chat and we will get to them as and when. But for now, let's start off with an easy one. I say easy, nothing's easy, but let's start off with one to get us in the mood. So Matt, in case you're not familiar, hopefully you are, but in case we're not familiar, can you explain what we mean by a vape? And what do we mean by a disposable vape as opposed to any other kind of vape?
Yeah, of course. I'll try and explain in simple terms, but I'm sure most people here are interested in the topic and already know. But for those who don't, so vape can also be known as an e-cigarette, and it's an electronic device that's used to heat up a liquid that can be inhaled as an aerosol. And this process is called vaporization, hence the term vape. So, and the liquid inside is called a vape juice or an e-liquid. And it typically contains nicotine, which is the addictive substance found naturally in tobacco. But importantly, vape juice does not contain tobacco itself. Vape juice also contains a number of additives, which often gives it its flavor. So that's why there's a lot of debate around flavors and whether they have youth appeal or not. And there are various different categories of vapes. So you've got rechargeable or refillable vapes, which can be known as pod-based systems or tank-based systems. So a pod-based system is the popular Juul brand, where you have little pods which has the vape juice in, and once that's finished, you can put a new pod in and carry on using the electronic device, so there's no waste of the battery. Then the tank-based system is a small little tank you fill up with vape juice, and you vaporize the juice in that way. But importantly, for the sake of today's discussion, there's also a category called disposable vapes. And importantly, the liquid inside disposable vapes can't be refilled, really. So once you finish the liquid inside, you've got to either dispose of it by recycling it, which can be very hard to do, or what most people do is they kind of chuck it straight in the trash. And I think we're going to talk a lot more about that later.
I think we are. Thanks, Matt. That's a really good explanation. And I know we don't just like anecdata here, we like hard, cold facts. So, John, can you tell us what the market is for vapes in the UK? My impression is that the UK has really got into vapes in a big way compared to maybe some other countries in the rest of the world. And where do we typically buy them in the UK?
Yeah, absolutely. The UK is actually the second largest market in the world for vaping products. And that's primarily because we have a government that is supportive of vaping. It understands that the harm from combustible tobacco is actually the smoking and the combustion of the product, not the nicotine. So it's been really pushing vapes for a number of years, and that's one of the reasons why it's taken off. Now we've got roughly around 4.2 million people vaping on a regular basis in the UK. That's up roughly by 600,000 since last year. And it is the most successful way now for adults to quit smoking if they can't give up by any other means. So it's a really important product when you consider that 220 people die every day from smoking related diseases. It's really, really important that we understand that while these products are not 100% safe, they're a far safer alternative than combustible tobacco.
Okay, and when you talk about people giving up, you mean vapes specifically are the most successful way at the moment, or you mean nicotine replacement products in general?
No, actually vaping is more successful than all other nicotine replacement products combined here in the UK. And especially when you combine them with, guidance from smoking cessation clinics, that's really, really helpful. We also find that, the guidance that they get from specialty vape stores, rather than a normal convenience store, is always extremely helpful, because while vaping is popular, there's no specific one device that works for everybody. Everybody is different. Everybody is a little bit, vapes in a different manner. They vape at different nicotine strengths, etc. So it's really important that vapers, to get the best results from it, get a little bit of advice either from a stop smoking centre or from a vape shop.
That's really interesting. And how much money are we spending on vapes in the UK?
I've seen it's difficult to quantify it exactly, but it's in the region of about £3 billion now per year.
3 billion?
Correct, yes.
Wow.
And in fact, the CEBR did a report on vaping and it's what it contributes to the economy. And it was very interesting. They reckon that it saves the NHS yearly in the region of about £350 million per year.
Okay, and we don't just say the name of that organisation again, because I think it was an acronym, and I get paid for every acronym I spot.
The CEBR.
Okay. Thank you, John. Right, so vapes are great. They help people stop smoking in some situations, and people should be able to buy them and use them as they need to get off those nasty cigarettes that are going to kill you. Gillian, what's the problem?
I think there are a couple of different issues here. Certainly for ourselves, generally within the Scottish Parliament, there's quite a strong concern about these in terms of environmental reasons. A lot of them are being littered, as Matt said earlier. Recycling them and disposing of them properly is currently quite difficult, despite the legal regulations and things on shops to provide return points for them. Can walk into some of my local supermarkets and see where even makeup can be disposed of easily and recycled, but not necessarily vapes themselves, which means a lot are being picked up in parks, on beaches, turning up in beach cleans, and not even just the whole vapes themselves. There's a lot of times where the outer casings or just the batteries themselves are being found. The amount of lithium that's being sent to waste and the fire risk of these under pressure is certainly something that's concerning some of the big disposal companies at the moment. On a health side of things, obviously vaping is less harmful than tobacco smoking. We don't have long-term data on how safe these are over decades of use, or what even a safe level of vaping use actually is, and what that looks like for different people. And obviously the rise in the number of children and young people using these vapes is particularly concerning for me. They are an age-restricted product, and children and young people getting their hands on these is highly concerning, not just for myself, but I know for many other politicians around the country.
Mm-hmm. We'll come back to that in a little bit if we can, but I think for me, when we started working on this, I hadn't realized there were batteries in these vapes, even the ones you throw away. So that's the way that you make the liquid hot, so it vaporizes, as Matt explained. But the lithium in these batteries, this is this rare material that we need for all sorts of, the green economy, batteries, electric cars, all of that stuff. And we did some research, didn't we, Matt, around what happens to vapes. And TLDR, that, most of the time, these batteries are not finding their way to a delightful battery recycling station, are they?
Yeah, that's right. We ran some research with an organisation called Material Focus last year, and it was a large survey run by Opinion, which found that across the country about 2 vapes are being thrown away into the garbage every second. So that's about 1 million a week, rather than being recycled. So yeah, it's a massive problem. And as Gillian mentioned, they contain lithium, which is such an important substance. So even though each vape contains a very small amount of lithium, the cumulative effect of chucking away these vapes is absolutely massive. And we actually repeated the research in the US, where disposable vapes are also very popular. And that, as you can imagine, because America's a much bigger country and it has much worse recycling facilities, the waste in the US is even worse. So it's not just a UK problem, this is a global problem when it comes to the environment.
And we've had a look on lots of the main manufacturers and importers' websites, and there is information about how to kind of send back your empty vapes or recycle them. I mean, it's hard to know right now how much that's being taken up, and there have been, as you both said, accounts of fires in recycling centres and within rubbish trucks and things like that. So I think that is a very interesting problem. John, what do you say, and what does UK VIA say to these claims around the kind of the environmental impact of vapes, both with the units themselves and the batteries and the chemicals that they contain?
Well, it's very interesting that Matt, points to a survey that was done over a year ago. There's an awful lot that's happened in the last year. Most of the large commercial recycling companies now have specific dedicated vape recycling programs in place. Many of the retailers throughout the country and brands themselves are running recycling programs. And while it's not 100% where it needs to be, it's making great progress. And I think one of the issues that's happened with this product is because it became so popular so quickly. I think everybody was taken a little bit by surprise, both the government in its own regulation, and even when we started looking at this over 2 years ago, when we approached the government, even the government couldn't tell us that these products were covered by the WEEE regulations. It took quite a bit of cajoling out of them. And the regulation itself is hidden inside of toy regulation. So if you're a manufacturer, and most of these manufacturers are based in Shenzhen in China, they probably don't know their legal obligations. So one of the things that we've been really doing is educating all of those companies on what their legal obligations are. The other point that Gillian pointed out is that, these products should be recyclable anywhere where battery products are sold. And that's really not the case. Now it's changing rapidly. I know I've talked to Morrison's, I've talked to Tesco's in the last month, and they are putting the programs in place. So it will get easier. But with the best will in the world, we can make recycling very easy for consumers. But unless we're actually encouraging those consumers to do the right thing, it's not going to work. And we've seen in certain areas, I spoke to my counterparts in Germany, for instance, and they encourage consumers to bring one back by offering them a free device for every 10 they bring back. And that seems to be working quite well. But things like a deposit scheme, for instance, wouldn't be the worst thing in the world for our product. And I've talked to a number of MPs, for instance, about putting a £1 deposit on a vaping device. Now, I can guarantee you, if there was £1 attached in value to every one of those disposables, either the consumers will be bringing them back or somebody will be picking them up and bringing them back to make quite a considerable amount of money. But there's various solutions like that we can look at, because the industry wants to do the right thing. It's not here to cause problems. It's here to help adult smokers move away from a product that will kill them to one that is drastically less harmful for them. And that's our ultimate goal. So how we can do that while striking a balance with the environment is really important. And I think the other thing to look at here is the legislation itself is not helping the situation. So we have a tank size maximum, for instance, of 2 milliliters of liquid that can be put into these devices. Now we've and others have called on the government to look at potentially increasing the tank size to maybe 10 milliliters. And that will help from two different fronts. It will, one, take 5 products out of the marketplace and 5 batteries that are currently being used. But it will also take the price of the device out of that pocket money range for young people, because the price range will be probably in the range of 10 to 15 pounds instead of the £5 that we're seeing at the moment, which would help, on both fronts. So there's lots of things that we can look at, but it's just a matter of the government getting around the table with the industry and doing that. We've also seen...
Hang on, if I can just come in there, John. I sniffed out another acronym, which was WEEE, which, while also being hilarious, is Waste from Electrical and Electronic Equipment, which is known as WEEE. And that's the scheme where basically companies have an obligation to take apart and recycle and reuse the components of their products once they've ended their useful life.
Well, the companies have to pay into a fund based on the amount of products that they're bringing in. But even within that legislation, the terminology that is used is very confusing. So they use the word, for instance, distributor liability. Well, by distributor, they mean retailer. Now, by distributor, the industry means the person importing the product into the country. So again, that's very confusing for retailers out there to try and understand what their legal obligation is. And there's also many brands that don't import their own products. It's done by wholesalers and distributors. So people, for instance, are wrongly pointing the finger at the brand as being responsible for registering, whereas it's actually their distributors that are legally responsible. So this is where we've called for the legislation to be improved and clarified a little bit more. But you can't wait for government to do it. That could take a year, it could take 2 years. So this is why we're looking at what changes can the industry make now. And even in product design, for instance, we're seeing innovation being made there. And I actually have a device here. I don't know if you can see it properly, but this is almost plastic free and 99% recyclable. But for a consumer to take it apart, it's very simple to take both ends out. The battery pops straight out. This is cardboard. This is biodegradable silicone, and off you go. It makes it far easier to
can I just jump in? Like, the most popular disposable vapes at the moment aren't those products. I know that's a new product, but and I was reading like the We statements on one of the most popular brands in the country, and it was telling you in order to recycle it properly, you had to take it apart, which is actually quite potentially dangerous advice, because you shouldn't be disassembling this product yourself. Like we've spoken to materials experts in the past, which have advised against taking them apart yourself. So there's no proper way, in my opinion, for consumers to recycle these at the moment. So we've got this product creating huge levels of waste. And just to point out that although our research on the waste created was a year old, Material Focus ran the research again this year with the Financial Times, and they found very similar levels of waste. So even though these manufacturers or importers might be signing up to these schemes, it's not having a material impact on the amount of waste created. So I think something else needs to be done.
Well, absolutely. As I pointed out earlier, we have to get consumers to actually take action. You can have all the recycling programs you want in the world in place, but unless the consumer is actually doing it, then that's not going to help. You know, I had an interesting function that I went to in Parliament this week in Westminster, and it was done by waste experts, and they've published a report on how recyclable these products are. And the vast majority of products are anywhere between 70% to 99% recyclable if they are recycled in the proper manner. And I think that's why it's really important for us to get behind programs that encourage consumers to do the right thing and to recycle them in a responsible way and not just drop them on the ground.
Okay, I'm interested in Gillian's thoughts on this. I'm also kind of wondering if you have any thoughts on the proposal from John that you could increase the tank size from 2 mils to 10 mils, which is 5 times more. And although I take the point about it making it more expensive than pocket money prices, it's still not that expensive and potentially has a lot more puffs in it. So Gillian, come tell us what you're thinking about some of the things you've heard so far.
I think in terms of the recyclability of these, essentially a mass consumer use, single-use electronic has been developed during a climate crisis that is difficult to recycle and dispose of in an easy and accessible manner for consumers. It's difficult to find these points without going to, certainly in Scotland, without going to your local tip or refuse centre to go and give them back. If we're relying on people doing that, the number of people in some areas with a car and the accessibility of some of these places is quite difficult. So it should be on retailers and on industry to make sure that the products they sell for profit don't impact the local environment for people. Absolutely echo Matt's comment of do not take these apart yourself. The number of them that I see stepped on and all those sorts of things, it's not great, the number of them that are lying around. We need to really look at this. I don't think increasing the tank size is something that is advantageous to anyone really, although it puts it out with that pocket money range for one day. If you're making the tank size bigger, they're supposed to last longer. Therefore, over the course of a week, they're still just as affordable as they were over the course of that week to that young person or whoever it is that's buying them. So I don't think merely increasing the tank size is something that takes it out with the appeal to children young people. I think banning them is where we need to go. If we're still going after that smoking cessation tool, then refillable ones are still there as an alternative. There are issues with the waste that mass use of them would probably generate too, and that certainly needs some looking at long before we get to that point. I think deposit return schemes in other areas of government work, certainly here in Scotland, have been difficult to say the least, with current issues with UK government and how they want to go about some of these things too. So I don't know how easy a deposit return system would be for this when we've had issues with other ones. But there's lots of different ways across the world that countries regulate these, whether you're looking at them as a consumer product and are treating them in a similar way to other nicotine-based products, or whether you're looking at them from a pharmaceutical point of view. And as I said, there's a mix across the world depending on which way places have looked at these. I think a lot of those are based on the consumer nature and the way products are used in those individual countries, and certainly should serve as some food for thought for us. And they range from everything that the devices themselves are legal, but the sale and possession of the nicotine used in them is illegal in Costa Rica, Jamaica, Japan, and Mexico, for example. The Australian government is banning the importation of non-prescription based vaping products, and there'll be regulations on flavour and colour, and the products will require pharmaceutical-like plain packaging. There's other ones. Brazil and Singapore, for example, have banned the sale, distribution, and the importation of e-cigarettes. So if we're looking at particularly how we stop that black market, and in a certain way, that's already got out ahead of us, as we've seen from some other articles that tested the lead, nickel, and chromium in some of these illegal vapes. That's got out ahead of us to a certain extent, whereas actually the importation, but making the importation of them illegal or certainly heavily restricted, would serve as one way to stop some of these products getting into the country. Malta regulate them as a tobacco product, similarly to their tobacco products, that they can't be advertised, they can't be used in public places and such like, as well. So there is and Cambodia, Jordan, Nepal, Panama have all banned them entirely. So there's a range of different ways across the world that it's being done. We're certainly keeping a close eye on how countries that have similar use patterns to ourselves are being affected by the regulation in those countries. But again, that all has to apply to how they're being used here, who they're being used by here, and what we can do in terms of, certainly for ourselves in the Scottish Parliament, what we can do in terms of devolved legislation versus reserved competences at Westminster.
Thanks, Gillian. It's obviously very complicated. In terms of some of the stories you've heard from the people you represent, what are the worries or the concerns that people have come to you with around, let's think particularly maybe about kind of underage people using these devices, because we haven't talked about youth very much so far.
A lot of parents and teachers very concerned about the impact on young people. As you said at the start of the live stream, lots of schools locking toilets between breaks because of vapes being used. Reports from teachers of children and young people taking a sneaky puff of a vape up the back of a classroom. There's real concern about the amount of nicotine that these young people are taking in, with potentially, if they haven't smoked before, not being aware of how much nicotine that actually is for them. And the Royal College of Child and Paediatric Health were at a roundtable I recently hosted. They have concerns. The British Heart Foundation, the Asthma and Lung UK, as well, all concerned about the impact on young lungs. I think a lot of people potentially aren't aware that these are age restricted to 18 as well. I was at an event with some of the members of the Scottish Youth Parliament speaking to adults who some thought it was age restricted to 16, not 18. And were slightly taken aback when I said they were age restricted to the same level as beer, spirits, other things as well, which is certainly a bit of public awareness that we need to do. There's also some concern, certainly for me, about what that means when children and young people try to give these nicotine-based products up. We don't have an awful lot of paediatric nicotine cessation specialists around at the moment, and certainly the way children and young people may be different to adults. And again, it's something we've never had to do on a mass scale before. So certainly something that we're keeping an eye on and that we're quite concerned about. And again, that long-term data on what the impact on health is from long-term use. Most studies that have been done at all on any form of health implications are mainly based in adults. So that data is absolutely few and far between for under 18s as well.
That's kind of mind-blowing that we'd have to look at paediatric nicotine cessation. It's just one of those moments where you kind of realise we're talking about this as like, oh yeah, some people are using these things, and then you think about the long-term implications. Matt, what do we know about the health risks or not of vaping? And also explain, I don't know if you know what unicorn shake is. I don't know what it tastes like. I don't know what colour it is. I don't know where it came from, but I don't know. If these are for adult smokers looking to quit, I'm a little bit skeptical about why they have such fun sounding names and colourful designs and sometimes look kind of cool. I say this as an old person who doesn't know what cool is anymore. But tell us a little bit about what's going on, in your opinion, around the design and the flavours, and also what we actually know about the flavours that go into these vapes.
Sure thing. Well, to touch on the health impact to start with, I think we touched on it at the start of the discussion, that we don't really know the long-term health impact of vapes. Although evidence does suggest they are much safer than cigarettes, but kind of inhaling anything which isn't clean air is unlikely to be good for you. And also there's evidence to suggest that nicotine is damaging for the adolescent brain, and there's been some research done on that subject. And if we're talking about youth vaping in particular, that's something we've got to be mindful of. So yeah, there's a lot of big question marks over the overall health impact. But like I say, yeah, there's an argument that it is much better for you than smoking. But I think we just need to be very careful in how these products are marketed, going on to your kind of youth marketing question, because you just need to look at these devices to see the colors they come in and the flavors, the cotton candy flavors or the orange gummy bear flavors, which do very much appear to have a strong appeal to children. Like this has been much debated within the wider tobacco conversation. A lot of cigarettes, well, across the EU, all flavors have been banned, because the argument is that these flavors do appeal to young people, and there is quite a lot of academic research around that topic. We've also done quite a lot of work around the specific marketing of these new nicotine products, including vapes, and the use of social media influencers, these very young looking people, and then also the sponsorship of sports and music events. So there's a suggestion that like these products are very much being targeted as kind of aspirational, cool products for young people, rather than like a more kind of medicinal style cessation device. And the tobacco industry has a long history of kind of targeting younger people. Like they even used a Flintstones cartoon in one campaign quite a few years ago. So with the tobacco industry getting heavily involved in disposable vapes themselves, you do have to question their motives in some regards. Obviously, as we said, tobacco companies all deny ever targeting young people, and they say they market responsibly. So you've got to be mindful of that. But a lot of the work we've done has very much shown these being advertised as kind of aspirational youth-led, youth-oriented as lifestyle products, rather than something which can help your 50-year-old kind of smoker quit smoking once and for all.
Thanks, Matt. And so, John, what do you think your members say to these claims, which they must hear quite a lot? Why are we having to kind of give these products like kind of sweetie or fruity flavors and make them look so kind of cool or interesting or well designed? If they're to try and get you off smoking, Surely they just need to kind of do that job. Why so much time and money and effort being put into marketing and design and flavors?
Well, one of the reasons that vaping has been so popular is because of the flavors. You know, I'm 58 years of age. I like flavors. I happen to like cola bottle. I'm one of these gin aficionados, and I find it interesting that we're talking about cotton candy. Well, I have a bottle of strawberry cotton candy gin downstairs, and I also have a bottle of bubblegum gin. You know, adults do like flavors. And especially when you consider that when somebody is moving away from smoking a cigarette, the last thing they want to be doing is reminding themselves that they were a smoker. So, you know, when you give up smoking for vaping, the first thing that happens over the first couple of weeks is your sense of smell comes back, your sense of taste comes back, because your mouth isn't being bombarded with thousands of chemicals and tar and all of these nasty things that are in cigarettes. And the tobacco taste actually starts to become horrible. But, you know, you mentioned a couple there, you know, unicorn shake, absolutely. Should those flavors be allowed? Absolutely not. And the most popular flavors actually here in the UK are fruit flavors. They're not these, you know.
But if they shouldn't, why are they still on the market if we shouldn't have them?
Very simply because the MHRA, who regulates vaping products in the UK, doesn't look at things like packaging. It doesn't look at things like flavor names. And I brought this a specific example to the attention of the MHRA about 2 years ago of a brand that was in the shape of a lollipop. It even had lolly in the name, but it was MHRA approved. And now this is a ridiculous situation. So we've called on the government to make sure that the MHRA is given the mandate to look at product design and to look at the flavor names that are being used, because many of them are actually illegal. You see these ones out there with Skittles and you know, Mars bars. Well, these are all illegal products. They're not allowed to be sold in this country, not only because of the vaping regulations, but also because of the intellectual property regulations that we have in this country. Because I can guarantee you that Mars hasn't given, and Skittles haven't given the go-ahead for the use of their name in these products. And we were very...
I'm going to jump in there, John, just because we've got a load of questions that have just come through. But I would just say, obviously, we haven't got a comment from MHRA, so we can't say what they would say, but presumably they would say that they're doing what they can to, you know, make sure the health of people in the UK is good. Gillian or Matt, did you want to come in on any of those points? Should we have a question from the audience? I think it might be more of a comment than a question, which I did invite, and therefore I'm very happy to see. Just going to read it so I don't mangle it. We don't have your name, but whoever said this, thank you so much. So the comment is, with plenty of viable rechargeable vape products available, we simply don't need disposables as a society. Adult smokers have cheaper, better, more environmentally conscious options available. Gillian, what do you say to that?
Yes, correct. I think there are so many issues with the disposable ones. To touch back on the illegal ones that John was just saying about there, we've gotten to a point where, with consumer products in particular, we've improved consumer product safety so much that actually to question the safety of some of the things you can buy in a shop doesn't even come across an awful lot of people's minds now. So, and I don't think I could tell you where I could find a comprehensive list of which brands of vapes are legal and which ones are illegal. And I don't know that anyone going into a shop would question which of those they're getting across the counter or buying from a website and things like that. So there's that real issue there, that we now have illicit products on the market that are getting into general circulation that are really difficult for the average consumer to tell which is which without having that knowledge. So there's definitely something we need to do in there, and I think that is around at the moment the tobacco register. There's things we can do in there, I think, to certainly solve some of that illegal product side of things.
And I mean, John, it'd be interesting to know from your and your members' points of view, apart from consumer choice, why do we need disposable vapes when there are so many other options, even just in vaping, let alone all the other nicotine replacement products? Why? Why do they need to be cheap? Why do they need to taste so good? And also, if I'm drinking flavoured gin, it's not because I'm trying to give up gin. It's because I like gin.
Exactly. Well,
right. So I'm not vaping. If I'm vaping a flavoured vape, that's suggesting I'm doing it because I like a flavoured vape, not because I'm trying to stop
smoking
No,
cigarettes?
you're doing it because you don't want to be a smoker anymore, which is the first reason. But to look at disposables, though, these are not a new product. They have been around for well over 15 years. And they've always served the exact same reason. They're a simple to use device. They're a cheaper entry point into vaping for those people who perhaps, live in lower income areas, which generally are the higher smoking areas. They're are also extremely popular with those people who have dexterity issues, older people that can't deal with technology. But what I found very interesting, we did a survey of over 2.5 million transactions for disposables over the last 3 months. And what we found out was, the average age of a consumer was 36 in buying these products. But the second thing we found out is they're not staying on them very long. It's generally 6 to 11 weeks before moving on to, as I said, an open tank system, which absolutely is the most efficient way you can vape. It's the cheapest way you can vape by a considerable margin.
And how soon do those people come off the open tank system then?
Well, generally people will either give up and are dropped down in the nicotine level they use in an open tank system, because the devices generally work better with lower nicotine. So in an open tank system, the most popular nicotine strengths are 3 or 6 milligram. In a disposable device, because it doesn't have the same power, and the users of those devices tends to be a newer smoker, they are at the higher level of 20 milligrams, which is the highest level of nicotine allowed here in the UK. Now, in other regions, there is no restriction on the amount of nicotine you can have, which some of the illegal products that we're seeing coming into the country, say from America, for instance, will have an average of 50 milligrams of nicotine in it, which is legal there. But these products do serve a purpose.
Just coming in on that, the tobacco companies dream of a smoke-free future, a world without cigarettes, which is great. By that reasoning, we should also eventually end up with a world without vapes.
Quite possibly that could be the case.
But we don't see that happening. And if that was going to happen, why do we need to market them? If you need to find a vape, you could just go to a doctor and ask for one.
Because people like to consume nicotine. It's a stimulant. I don't think we are ever going to get to a world where there will be zero nicotine consumption. I've seen presentations on nicotine going back almost to the Stone Age, because nicotine is a product that is available in vegetables that we consume. I can guarantee you most people listening to this podcast are consuming nicotine in some way or form, just not at the same level.
I think that's a bit of a disingenuous argument if we're talking about breathing large amounts of nicotine into your body to get it bioavailable, as opposed to eating it in some vegetables.
I'm just saying that nicotine is a part of everyday life.
So are many things that you wouldn't want to take in high doses if you didn't need to. One more question from the audience. Why are the fines so low for shops selling to underage people buying vapes? What do we know about how well this is enforced or not? I just suspect it's not very well enforced, but who has some numbers on kind of how this is looked at? John?
I will give you some really shocking numbers.
Yes, please.
One of our members, Arcus for Compliance, has actually done a Freedom of Information Act report on it. Now, while the government will tell you that, the maximum fine is £2,500 to £3,000 for these stores, the reality is that stores are not being fined at all, or ridiculous amounts of money. There was a story from about 4 weeks ago where a court imposed a £26 fine on a store selling to a 14-year-old. Now, this is one of the reasons why we as a trade association have been pushing for fines to be increased to a minimum of £10,000 per instance, not only for retailers of these products, but also for distributors of these products, so that they only supply legally registered products. Now, the second issue is some of the places where these products are sold are highly inappropriate. We're seeing candy shops selling them. I'm seeing butcher shops, barber shops selling these products. And as Gillian pointed out, they are an adult age-gated product. It is illegal for anybody under the age of 18 to buy these products. And it's illegal for anybody to buy them for anybody under the age of 18. So I'm even hearing parents going out buying these products for the young people. And that's really the only thing that's going to change, because most of the retailers are doing the right thing. Many of them have robust age verification processes in place. But the small handful of these rogue distributors and retailers that frankly couldn't care less what they sell to anybody, is really having a huge effect. And we're also seeing different channels as well. These home delivery services, for instance. I've talked to a number of young people and they've told me, yeah, they say they age verify, but all you've got to do is give the driver a big enough tip and they look the other way.
Okay, John. Well, we don't have any evidence of that, so I think let's maybe park that one for here.
Right.
But that's obviously what you've heard from some of your.
Could I jump in on a few of those points?
Yes,
yeah, I think it's quite easy to blame the retailers rather than the tobacco companies themselves. Like when you look back at statements tobacco executives or researchers have made in the past, it's very much been about nicotine as a product they're selling. I'm just looking at some famous quotes here. So famously in 1963, a tobacco executive wrote that we are then in the business of selling nicotine, an addictive drug. And then 10 years later, tobacco company researcher wrote, the cigarette should be conceived not as a product, but as a package. The product is nicotine. Think of a cigarette pack as a storage container for a day's supply of nicotine. So I think you've got to very much think of these disposable vapes and other products as a commercial enterprise. Obviously, as we discussed, vaping is better than smoking cigarettes. But to John's point that people who use disposable vapes will then transition to tank-based systems, that argument cuts both ways. So there's a lot of talk about vaping being a gateway to cigarette smoking. And we've spoken to experts in the past. I've spoken to an FDA expert, which says that people will move to whatever fulfills their nicotine addiction the best. So that could be moving from smoking to vaping, or it could very well be moving from vaping to smoking. So I think you just got to consider those points when you view the argument as a whole.
If I could just nip in on some of the how we crack down on those people under 18 getting a hold of them. There's certainly an issue with the way this is looked at the moment. They're not people selling these are not subject to licenses in the same way that you are for alcohol. So part of the deterrent of being caught selling alcohol to underagers is that you can ultimately get your license taken off you, and that impact your business and your livelihood. That doesn't happen in the same way with nicotine-based products, tobacco products as well. So there's definitely some tightening up that needs done on that. Part of the problem as well is just the proliferation of these shops and the number of places selling them. There are not the number of trading standards agents to cover the number of premises that they're going to have to test purchase as a result. So there's real issues with just the ground they can cover. There's certainly been a high number of test purchase failures in the likes of Dundee in Scotland and things like that as well. So there's a multitude of issues there, as well as the online retailers, who many of them just have a box that pops up with a button that says, I confirm I'm over the age of 18. Then as long as you have a bank card, which most young people do now, compared to maybe when I was a teenager and things, and you got a tenner to go out and go to the cinema. Most of them have bank accounts and bank cards and the ability to purchase things online if they so wish. So it's very difficult to tackle that side of things as well, which is really where we need to do some more on the regulation of the importation. And by making that register more comprehensive, we can also trace where these illegal products are coming in from, because we know we can ask people where they bought them and all those sorts of things and trace them back to people bringing them into the country too, which ultimately will be better for people's health if the illegal ones that contain the lead, nickel and chromium are not getting to people in the first place.
Thank you, Gillian. So I think we've found some common ground, and we found some ground that is still, let's say, quite some way apart. And just to undermine completely the idea of having a 52-minute long debate, I'm now going to ask you all the question at the title of this. And if we could just say in a sentence, let's start with Gillian. Gillian, should the UK ban disposable vapes?
Yes, we should. The invention of a new single-use electronic in a climate crisis is something that we should not be continuing to produce, and we need to make sure that for young people, they're not continuing to be available for them.
John, same to you. Should the UK ban disposable vapes?
Absolutely not. But as Gillian pointed out, we do have to tighten up the current regulations that are in place, especially around the fines and the licensing of retailers who sell vape products. 100% agree with you, Gillian. We need a license for all vape retailers.
Thank you very much. And I think we will end it there. Just want to say thank you so much. Gillian Mackay, MSP, thank you so much for your time. John Dunne, very senior person at UK VIA, which I've forgotten, General Director. Thank you for your time. Matt Chapman, thank you for your time. Although I have much of it in my life, it's been lovely to also have it here as well. Just want to say to everyone, thanks again for joining us, no matter which system you've come through. I understand there's been a bit of syncing issues, so apologies for that. You can just imagine you're watching like a badly dubbed 1980s video. Please go to tbij.com to read our latest investigations and our historical work on tobacco. If you have any tips, you can look us all up on our people page and get in touch. Thank you for watching TBIJ Live. Come back to see the next one. It will be on another fascinating subject, which we will take you to the heart of investigative journalism. If you've enjoyed it, please tell a friend. If you haven't, please tell my mum that she should not let me out the house next time. Don't forget to visit tbij.com, sign up to our newsletter, give us some pennies if you can afford it, and we will be in touch with you all very soon. Thank you very much and see you next time.